Hello and welcome. Welcome to Woman to Woman. This is Lady Christine Carmichael Foster, and I'm so glad to be with you all today. Today is a new day, and I believe that God is making a new start in the lives of many of you women today. As I always say, it gives me great honor and privilege to join you every Saturday to be able to share and to bring to the forefront another woman that has a great ministry in their own right, in which they are doing great and marvelous things within the community and in their home churches. Some of them entrepreneurs, some of them authors, but whatever venue they're in, they are making a mark, their mark that God has designed them to do in this world. So we're so glad to be here. I hope that each and every one of you are encouraged to continue to strive for your own greatness, because I believe in uplifting and encouraging and pushing my sisters in the world, those that I may never have the chance to meet. But I know that by watching us on TV here on Roku and Facebook and YouTube, our websites and so many others, that you're going to be touched and you're going to be helped by the things that you hear and you witness in the testimonies and stories of such great women just like you. We didn't all start where we are now. We had a past, we had a background, we had some things that we had to go through. And each one of these ladies that I have brought forth and will continue to bring forth are sharing their stories of overcoming. So today gives me great privilege to introduce to some of you all Pastor Cervantiz Shelton, who is a native of Washington, D.C., who at a young age realized that she had a passion for youth and young people and aspired to teach. In 1990, she joined Jericho Baptist Church under the leadership of late Bishop James R. Peebles and the late Apostle Betty Peebles, where she served for more than 20 plus years. She is currently serving as the assistant pastor at the Citadel's Cathedral of Prayer International under the leadership of the senior pastor, global leader, Apostle Thomas W. Ridgely, alongside Bishop Designate and resident pastor, Jeff A. Brook. During her 8-year tenure at CCOPI, she has served as the pastor of women, where she was the senior leader of the women's ministry of Redefined Generation Dance Ministry, assistant to the director of the hospitality ministry, and also serves as co-chairman alongside of the pastor of evangelism. So it brings me a great honor and privilege to bring to you all Pastor Cervantiz Shelton. Won't you welcome her?
Hello.
Hello, Pastor.
How are you?
We are blessed and highly favored of the Lord, as I know that you are as well.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much for this opportunity, not only to be with you, but to speak to the women that you mentor and that follow your broadcast. It is truly an honor, and I give God all the glory for this opportunity.
Well, we truly take it and definitely as not robbery that you have taken the opportunity and time to be a part of this broadcast. It gives us a great honor and privilege just to meet you. I want to say thank you, especially to my friend Selena O, who was the one who introduced me to you virtually. And like I said, it's when she introduced me, I know she knows what our ministry is about and what we're trying to do. So if she brought you forward to us, that I knew you were going to be a great woman to
Thank
introduce.
you. And
Yes.
thank you also, Selena. I remember Selena from my Jericho days. So, yes. Thank you.
Well, we're
again.
so grateful, as we said, to have you here. We're just going to allow God to share, show us which way to go in this moment, and just kind of talk and allow you to share. As I was talking and reading over your bio, I saw that one of the areas in ministry that you were pastor over was a ministry to women. And so how did that begin? Because you shared early in age, you knew that you had this ministry for young people, and how did all that begin?
Well, I started my ministry under Apostle People, and there was a need for youth ministers.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I stepped up into the position was to be the director of the nursery ministry and the youth ministry. And
Mm-hmm.
I really love children.
Okay.
I really love the babies, and they were always a passion. So in my transition from Jericho, and I went to Citadel, about a year after I had been there, there were a lot of vacant spots. So
Okay.
our apostle, he said, "Okay, we're having a leadership meeting," and he's like, "Okay, well." At the time, I was an elder. He said, "So, Elder Maryville, which was my married name, I'm divorced now.
Okay.
You will now have you are going to be the pastor of women." And I was like, "Huh? What? Me? I don't know anything about pastoring women. That was not my passion." However,
Mm-hmm.
during that transition and the learning of it, I became more passionate about women and the things that women go through. Because as a
Right.
woman, we think we're always called, especially in a pastor's position. I'm going to put it this way. In a
Okay.
pastoral position, we believe that we're called to everybody.
Hmm.
And that's not always true. What God has shown me during my transition from elder to pastor in the various roles that I was pastor over the ministries, He showed me that we're not called to everybody and that everybody
Mm.
is not called to our voice. And we have to be careful because we can connect to someone who is not there for us, for
Right.
lack of a better way of putting it. They may not be
Mm-hmm.
there for us and they may not hear us. And what can happen is that I found is that we can become, I'm going to say, damaged because we're like, okay, well, what am I doing wrong? And why is this person not interacting with me? And why is there no acceptance there? And how do I get this person to? And when that does not occur, what happens is we begin to lose focus. So God
Right.
asked me to actually sit down and examine what I was doing, and that it was not me. It was just that I was not called to those individuals.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because as women, we have a lot of personalities. We wear a lot of hats. And just
Right. That's
because
true.
you're married or you're
Mm-hmm.
single or you're a great cook or you're a great administrator does not mean that you are called to people that operate in those particular roles.
Mm-hmm.
And
Finding your niche.
exactly,
You know, that
exactly,
and yeah, finding your niche, and a lot of times they say staying in your lane.
exactly.
Knowing what your lane is. If we
Right.
if we think
And
about it, go ahead.
yeah. And as an assistant pastor, I understand and I now know that, yes,
Mm-hmm.
I may not be called, or everyone is not called to my voice. And although I have to shepherd them as their assistant pastor, I'm not necessarily called to them.
I understand that. I understand. It's like that specific amount of people, certain ones. We can be touched in all kinds of areas by each person, but there are certain people that God will have you to minister to. I always think about it because I've heard people say a lot of times to staying in your lane, and I don't know if maybe Pastor, maybe you could just check the volume on your side. Maybe there's an issue there. All right, so
Is that
a
better?
lot of times it's a little bit better. It's
Okay.
just a little crackle, and I'm not sure exactly where. But we'll go ahead on. I was gonna say, sometimes you make the analogy about being on a highway. We're on the highway. Usually, a highway has 2 lanes at least, but it go out to 4. But it's important that we all are using our signals and
Correct.
getting in the right lane when we're supposed to be. Because if not, if we cross over, we could cause an accident.
That's very
And
true.
so a lot of times that's what happens when we aren't necessarily sure of what our lane is and where we're supposed to be. It causes us to be in somebody else's lane and almost have a head-on collision or an accident
Right.
because of that.
True.
So it's good
And
that
and
you were
being
able to know
female,
that.
yes, I do. And I found that out because as a female, an
Mm-hmm.
emotional being, then we can get into our feelings to say, well, why is this person going to everybody else but not coming to me? And
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily you. It's just that, as I said, they're not called to you. And
Right.
learning, and you probably understand this process, learning the difference in covering, called, and operating just as a listening ear are
Mm-hmm.
totally different lanes that you have to walk in. And just like here in the Maryland area, we have 495. 495 has about 4 lanes now.
Right.
And so you have the speeding lane, you have the moderate lane, you have the cautious lane, and then you have the slow lane.
Mm-hmm.
So if I jump from the slow lane all the way over to the fast lane, but
Right.
I'm not moving at the 65 mile per hour,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to offend and upset a lot of people because a lot of drivers, once they gain their momentum, they want to
Right.
keep moving.
Keep going. That's right. Keep going.
So if I'm only doing 45 and they're doing 65, and I jump from the 45 per mile hour lane all the way up to the 65, and I don't accelerate, then I'm going to cause harm and damage to the individual
Right.
that is not called to me. And
And
so
and that is
it's
so true. It
right.
be,
And
and
it's
very
kind of
true.
humbling yourself.
Yes, it does involve that, realizing that, you know, when you're speaking of that, also just understanding that that's the purpose between the fivefold ministry gifts, that we each have a purpose. Each of those evangelists, the pastor, the teacher, the prophet, the apostle, they each have their own job,
Correct.
and
And we,
and they're
we
not all the same,
and
you
we
know.
all operate together as I believe it's in Thessalonians where it says that we're one body but many parts.
That's right.
So you have to
That's right.
understand, as you just said, you have to understand what part you play.
Hmm.
Where do I fit
Yes.
in? Where on this hand do I fit? And which finger
Hmm.
do what I actually need to use to be effective in the ministry that I'm called to?
That's right. That's
And
right.
while I know I operate right now, I know the four ascension gifts that I operate in, but I cannot operate prophetically always.
Hmm.
I can't be a prophet while I'm teaching.
Mm.
And I can teach prophetically, but there's a
Right.
difference. I cannot get
Hmm.
up in front of one of my classes and prophesy the whole class. What have you learned? If you're in a class, you're there to
Right.
learn. So if I prophesy the whole class, what have I done to the class?
Right. That's true.
And what is
Exactly.
my class gain?
Hmm.
And if I'm evangelizing and I'm operating as a pastor, even though yes, I'm a pastor, however, in evangelizing, I have to be the evangelist
Right.
and not the pastor, because I'm out to gather the souls, not just
That's
for my
right.
church, but unto Christ. So I can't, you have to learn what
What
area.
those, yeah, knowing your area. And I think that, and I guess for somebody who is maybe not a believer, who could be watching and put it in another, flip it to another frame, meaning what's my purpose? So, um, which also has to do with your lane and in natural life, knowing us all knowing our purposes. And I don't know one person who doesn't ask that question. Why am I here? What is my purpose? And in actuality, we're saying, what is my lane? And it's so important that we know what that is. And sometimes, in order to really know what it is, we have to ask God, show me what my lane is, Lord, so that so we can be productive, because if you're
Exactly.
not really sure, when we're not sure what our lane is, and I ask God different things all the time, and I've been there many a day. I'm like, okay, Lord, show me which way, because we can have all of these ideas and all of these different things that we may be um, gifted at, or in certain ways have the ability or have a dream about, but if it's not necessarily the lane or the purpose that we have or God has on our lives, then that makes a big difference. It kind of hinders you because you're not sure.
Excuse me, absolutely. And one thing that I learned under Apostle Betty Peoples, is that your purpose is your passion.
Mm-hmm.
That thing that you're passionate about, that you just cannot see yourself not doing, that can be your purpose. And there's a difference in your purpose and your gift. So we have to understand, many are gifted to sing,
Mm-hmm.
but as you're singing your purpose. So if you're called to sing R&B, let's say for instance, then
Mm-hmm.
that's to stay in the lane, and you know it's your purpose, because when others see you, they're going to continue to call you into that.
Right.
If you're called to be a prophetic singer, which means you change the atmosphere anytime you open your mouth, whether it's through song or just ministering or calling someone into the atmosphere of worship, then
Yes.
that is your purpose. It doesn't mean that you're actually called to be a famous gospel artist,
Mm-hmm.
because most gospel artists that I follow tend to say that their singing was the avenue that God used to get
Mm-hmm.
them to the purpose of pastoring or preaching or teaching or doing whatever it is that God needed them to do. So your purpose is that God ordained thing that you really cannot see yourself not doing.
So your purpose is what you cannot see yourself doing, for those that are listening. So 'cause we all have that, that battle sometimes. What is my purpose? And I watch and listen to a lot of different, people who have kind of what we would say made it to where they're supposed, or found that purpose for them, you know, and a lot of times they'll share little tidbits to kind of give you uh, a way of helping you to figure that out. And so it was really, really good, how you were saying that, for one, knowing that your purpose is something that you just can't see yourself not doing. If you're not doing that, it doesn't make you happy. That's something that is also something you do as if you were just breathing. It's normally not work for you. It's just a part of you,
It's a
you
part
know.
of you.
Yeah, it's a part of you. And they say your gift will make room for you. So if you're gifted to do something, that those doors open because people will call you to do those things, as you were sharing. And that is important. But really what stuck home and does ring true with me as well, that a lot of times those gifts are the avenue. They are the door to what really your purpose is. And sometimes we can get lost in between there, thinking that maybe my gift is what I'm supposed to be doing, but it doesn't always have to actually be. It's not that it's ever not a part of what you do, because it's always going to be a part, but it's not necessarily where God's design purpose for your main purpose is for you.
Yes, because
So
I always
that is
thought that my purpose was to teach.
okay.
I always thought my purpose was to teach. I've never been a teacher, other than in the ascension gifts. I've never worked in a school. I've never had a classroom of 30 people or 30 students.
Mm-hmm.
However, as God called me to teaching, He took me a totally different way. Because when you're in school, it's always like, well, what do you want to do when you grow up, and what do you want to do when you grow up, and this and that, and well, what are you called to do? I always thought I would be a teacher or a lawyer.
Okay.
I've never taught outside or inside the public school system. I know a lot about law,
Mm-hmm.
but I've never been in a courtroom. And when God is funny, because when He called me to teach, it was a totally different way.
Mm.
And He called me to teach His people
Mm-hmm.
in an unorthodox manner.
Right.
So I'm not your normal teacher, because I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
take the foolish things to make you understand and become wise in it.
Right. So I tell you, that is something, just being able to figure those things out. Because I know when growing up, I used to want to be a teacher. I played like I was the teacher. There's a lot of different things that you do, but I am teaching now. So it wasn't a teacher in a school, but I have been a teacher, in a different way in the ministry now. I teach. Sometimes I'm able to instruct in the ladies and in our groups. I'm able to teach. Sometimes it's one-on-one, just kind of sharing wisdom with somebody, to help them. And then there's so many other ways that God ends up using us, taking all those things that we've been through, and turning them into something great.
Mm-hmm.
As I was looking in your bio as well, Pastor, that you said that you had a passion for abused women and men, um, and you deal with areas or touch on areas that are not normally touched on or talked about. Can
Yeah.
you share a little bit about that?
Well, during my separation, divorce, we all have to go through the healing process.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And my marriage, what God showed me was my marriage actually ended 7 years prior to the separation and the divorce. And I was like, wow.
Mm.
And so what He allowed me to do was to reevaluate things and events, not only during my marriage, but during my life.
Right.
So one of the things that He took me back to was many years ago, when a neighbor of mine was abused by her boyfriend,
Mm-hmm.
to the point that it's when she knocked on the door, my mother and my son were so terrified at how she looked, and she begged me not to call the police or her family to
Right.
intervene, and that broke my heart. And I was like, well, God, what do I do? He said, you do what you do. You call somebody and you let them know what happened. And my sister also went through an abusive relationship
Mm-hmm.
to the point where her, at the time, baby daddy, excuse me if I'm being a little, but
It's all right.
he, whenever he would come around and attempt to abuse her, if I stepped in front of her, then he would just walk away and leave. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So I was so passionate that I had to really get into researching and finding the avenues on how I can help women who are in abusive relationships be
Right.
able to stand up for themselves. And during that process, it's been 3 years now, God gave me shattered pieces, rebuilding what remains.
Mm-hmm.
And what he showed me was that just as much as women are abused, the men are abused as well.
Right.
And it taught me that 1 in 4 men are abused on a daily
Mm-hmm.
basis, whereas I think the numbers were like 4 out of 15 women are abused.
Wow.
The alarming part is that the men don't report it.
And then that's most likely because of pride. Of course, for a man to have to admit that they're being abused would make them feel like they're less than, and also the way society has taught men to not share. They're not supposed to be vulnerable, you know.
Exactly.
So they
And
really have
they
to.
don't have, whereas we women, we usually have someone around us that we can talk to.
Right.
And not every woman does. So I'm not saying
That's
that
true.
across the board. A lot of
That's
women
true.
really don't have anybody they can go to. You know, their families have said, okay, if you're going to be with this man, then you can't. We're no longer supporting you in anything.
Right.
But a man does not have a buddy that they can go to. Or if they do, they don't want to hear, oh, you a wuss and you are not a man, and why don't you just go upside her head? And it's like, is that what we really want him to do? Because
Right.
that's going to cause him more problems. But his issue is not even being handled.
Handled. Right.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
he go back and he retaliates. And what happens
Mm-hmm.
is she's going to in turn call the police or call law enforcement or somebody or her family, her brothers, whatever. And then he has to deal with not only her abuse, but the abuse of the law, the legal system, as well as maybe the abuse of her brothers or her family. So then what does he begin to think? Well, I can't talk to nobody. If I tell anybody, that
Right.
means I'm less than who I'm supposed to be. And because of my macho, I'm just going to deal with it. And
Right.
if I go back and I hit this woman, then I got to face charges against it. But it's so what is their outlet, and what is their how do they deal with the situation? I did
That
a I
that
did a
is that's a
broadcast
big
a couple of weeks
that's a
ago.
good
Yeah.
question, you know.
Yes.
It, and really, to be honest, if we look at today's society, we know, for all types of reasons, but specifically us being women, we want to know that if there is an issue, that we have the right and the ability to go and be heard. Uh, but there are so many women and young girls and individuals who are abusing um, their freedom to say things, whether they say somebody did something to them um, or not, and whether it's true or not. A lot of times, society, the way it's set up, the law is not set up in the favor of men.
It is
So
not. It
it is
really is
not set
not.
up. It's
No,
not set up in their favor. So if a young woman or uh, somebody were to make an accusation, which of course, by right, we want it to be checked out if it's true or not. But the sad thing behind it is a lot of times the men are really affected by things that sometimes women are doing facetiously. They're doing it because they know they can, you know,
exactly.
without thinking about the fact for real behind it, how this man's life can be really messed up by something that you said that wasn't necessarily true.
Exactly.
Or and the fallout behind that is just, it's a domino effect of all that can affect that man at the time. So it's a catch 22 because we're women. If something happened to one of us or somebody we loved, we want to know that they could be heard and the truth, would weigh out in the courts or whatever would need to be done. But at the same token, there's also a flip side where sometimes, as I said, people are doing things and they're saying things that are not necessarily all the way as they portray it.
Hmm.
And then this man's life or the young man's life is hanging in the balance from there. They can't get jobs, and they have something on their record that they can't get off just because she said it.
Exactly.
You
And a
know, and
lot
it,
of abused men I found during my research come from home because a lot of mothers abuse them
hmm,
because of the way they felt or felt or
right.
feel about the fathers.
That's true. That is true.
So you remind me of him and I hate him, so I really don't like you.
You take
And
it out on the
not,
child.
but the child didn't ask to be here.
That's true. That is definitely true.
So why are you taking it? Then you need, what you really need to do, ma'am, is to heal
Hmm.
from what hurts you from the
Yes.
father of your children so that you can raise a healthy man. Because it
Yes.
goes twofold. Either that young man is going to grow up and become abusive
Hmm.
to his mate, or he's going to come up expecting women to abuse him.
Right.
And it's
Which
the
enables
seed
him
that
to
we as
be.
women plant. And one of the things that I pleaded during another session that I had, I was like,
Hmm,
women, we need to stop, especially us black women. We,
right.
black, African American, however we choose
Hmm.
to identify, we need to stop and get to the point where we can celebrate our black men because why?
Yes. Yes.
They are the lowest on the totem pole.
Mm,
If you have a corporation that is has to meet a certain quota for hiring standards, and you have a black man, you have a black woman, and you have other nationalities, how are you going to meet your quota if you have to add a woman and a nationality? You're going to hire that black woman because you killed two birds with one stone.
mm.
You've hired an African American to meet that quota, and you've hired a
A
female to
female.
meet that
Hmm.
quota. So, what does that do to the ego of the black man?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm definitely with you on that. I definitely believe that that's something that we as a whole, beginning with our little boys, and the
Right.
little boys that we come in contact with, then our husbands, a lot of times, there are people who, get married. A lot of women want a lot from their husbands or their fiancés or whichever the case may be, but they don't want to give much, you
They don't
know.
want to give a lot. No.
They don't want to give. They don't want to wash clothes and make sure there's dinner. Some of them don't want to work. They don't want to do. They just don't want to do anything. But
Don't
they
want to do
expect
anything.
everything from that man.
And
And
you and they're not affirming him.
right, they're
If
not
you
letting them know they're
affirm him,
behind them.
yes,
Hmm.
the affirmation of a woman can do so much
Yes,
for a man's ego.
ego. Yes, that's right. If we
Makes
don't
him
believe
think
in
that
them,
he's a giant in the land just
that's right.
because my woman has told me I
Hmm.
can do anything I want to do if I put my mind to it. If he
Yes.
has a business idea, you
Hmm.
are the incubator.
That's right. That's right. Yes,
Then
we
you
are.
take that vision and you
Mhm.
birth the vision, and then
That's
you
right.
write out the vision plan. You write out the business plan, and you present
Yes.
it back to him and allow him to go forth in it. The Bible
Yes.
says, "Without a vision, the people perish."
Right. And
A
and
man
and that's what
without a
our job
vision is
is.
nothing.
Hmm. That woman, that is our job. That's really our one of our main jobs is to, to help, push our mates, our
Exactly.
husbands,
That's
because the
part of being
Bible
a
says that
husband.
the man is known, the Proverbs 31 woman, her husband is known in the gate because of her, you
Because
know.
of her.
Yeah, a lot of times we think, women have gotten because of women's lib and all of that. I understand where women's lib started at, but what the original beginning intent behind women's lib has totally changed into a whole nother bug now,
A whole
where
nother bug.
we don't know our power and our strength in just being who we are. The woman with all the, a woman, a Proverbs 31 woman was not anybody to sleep on. She had a lot of things going on,
She had businesses.
yeah, she had businesses. She sought after a whole lot of different things,
She
and her
made sure
husband
her
was.
household was taken care of.
That's right.
She made
And her
sure
husband
that
was
her
known because of her.
husband,
He wouldn't have been known like he was other than because of her. You know, her backing him, her making sure that he looked good, that what his vision was, that the vision for the family or whatever they were doing was carried out.
mhm,
So I
and she
I
wasn't
totally
sitting around on Facebook and gossiping on the phone and all of
right,
this, that, and whatever. She was doing
right,
things to make sure that her household
was
was what it should be.
that's right. She was busy. She wasn't a busybody. She
She
was
was
busy
busy.
being
She was
productive.
busy making sure
Hmm.
that her man was the man of the house.
That's right. And see, a lot of times, and I'm going to close on this because God showed me some years ago the importance, how important we are as women. And society has tried to strip the name woman away from us. And now we have people who don't know who they really want to be. And I think it started part way because of the way women were treated,
Hmm.
but there are men who are starting to learn that the importance of having that woman. They want the woman to have a mind of her own. They want her to have something going on, to help. But then the women need to step back in place and realize that because my husband because I follow my husband doesn't mean that I am low, because we walk beside them. We came
Exactly.
out of their rib. We didn't come out their back. We're walking beside them. We actually cover their heart. We're there to protect them. to make sure that things are done as they should be. And it's so much that
It's so much, so much.
it's so much that we as women have. We have our children, and if you think about it, I always say, when the famous basketball players and football players, they'll get on TV and holler, "Hey, mom," because she is the one who is, raising the children. We're the one that's making sure that the needs of everybody is met.
Everybody.
Everybody is met. And so I do call us super women. We're super in God. God definitely equipped us to do the things that we're doing. So Pastor, I so appreciate you being with us today on our broadcast. And I pray that the women that have been listening have been helped and enjoying our topic today. And as we talked on Woman to Woman, we never know which way we're going to go, but we always try to be led by God and hoping that something that is being said is always going to touch somebody. Our thought and logo at Power of God Broadcasting is one person, one church, one community. If we're able to touch one person, able to encourage one church, able to make a difference in one community, then we're doing what God has assigned our hands to do. So,
Amen.
Pastor, we appreciate you being on this broadcast with us, and we're looking forward to working together in the near future.
Yes, I look forward as well. And thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this. And I know we could go on and on and on and on.
Yes, we could.
I know we have time limits. And I really, really enjoyed this.
Thank you. And so did we. You have a blessed day, women. We love you all.